Hello again, Planeswalkers. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic, bringing you another Commander Deck Tech video. And today I'm talking about Jalira, Master Polymorphist. But before I do, a quick reminder. If you think this video is good and you hit that like button or that subscribe button, that would be cool. So, Jalira is 3 and 1 blue to cast. She's a 2/2 legendary human wizard, which is uncommon, by the way, which is awesome. And you can pay 2 and a blue and tap Jalira and sacrifice another creature, and you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Jalira is awesome. Look at that, getting a creature onto the battlefield for free, basically polymorphing the creature into something hopefully better. Jalira is a great example of a commander that has tons of options, and when you're building her, the theme of your deck may not be clear. Is it a giant monster deck? Is it about making tons of tokens and sacrificing them? Is it an artifact theme? I mean, we do use lots of artifacts, and when you think about cards like Mirror Retriever and Scrap Trawler, they are great with sacrifice and graveyard decks, so maybe the theme is graveyard? Although we can make a combination of all of these, in the end we need to decide on one main theme. And I think the most logical choice is giant monsters, or titans. So in general, the goal of this deck is to produce a few tokens, which we can then polymorph into a few titans. We have 26 artifacts to help make tokens and to help make up for the mono blue shortcomings, so we do also include a few artifact synergies, but again, artifacts are not the main theme of the deck. I think one big mistake people make when building this deck is they include non-legendary creatures that are not titans. In other words, creatures that are not big enough and that don't do enough. So remember, when building Jalira, you want essentially every single non-legendary creature to be a game-winning monster. Do not include small legendary creatures just because they make tokens or because they let you scry or something like that. Those creatures are going to make you waste Jalira's ability when they are the ones revealed. You can still include smaller creatures, just make sure they're legendary. That way, you will not whiff with Jalira's activated ability. You want to be sure that what Jalira gets you is a Titan, so make sure you always activate Jalira's ability at the last possible moment. Unless you have some way to give the Titan haste, you'll normally wait and activate her ability in response to someone attacking you, or the preferred scenario, you activate her on your opponent's end step right before your own turn. This will help in protecting the Titan and making sure it gets to attack. So let's get into the deck, starting with the Titans of the deck, of which we've got 14. So the first is Wurmcoil Engine, which is 6 mana for a 6/6 worm with Death Touch and Lifelink. And when Wurmcoil Engine dies, you create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Lifelink. What's great about Wurmcoil Engine in this deck is it's not only a Titan, you know, one of our smaller Titans, we're starting with the small ones, but also it's a great sacrifice piece as well, you know, and it makes tokens as well, which is the secondary theme of this deck, absolutely. And in general, it's just really powerful. So to qualify for a Titan, by the way, you know, a card has to be a card that we're going to be really stoked to reveal off of Jalira. So Wurmcoil Engine and Steel Hellkite are our 2 smaller Titans. I would definitely be stoked to reveal either of these cards off of Jalira's ability. So Steel Hellkite is also 6 mana for a 5/5 dragon artifact creature with flying. You can pay 2 mana to give it +1/+0 till the end of the turn, or you can pay X to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So, if you know anything about mono blue, you know, they have basically almost no ways to actually straight up destroy creatures and leave no creature behind. Blue is great at bouncing creatures, turning creatures into other things, but sometimes you just need to just literally destroy things. You can't just keep bouncing things and have that be your master plan. So every blue deck should pretty much have a copy of Steel Hellkite in it, or similar artifacts that are going to act as solid removal and not just temporary removal like blue normally does. So Steel Hellkite is fabulous at that. It will literally destroy every single non-land permanent with that converted mana cost X that player controls, as long as Steel Hellkite dealt it damage this turn. Pretty sweet. Alright, on to our next Titans. We have Frost Titan, 4 and 2 blue for a 6/6 giant. Whenever Frost Titan becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 2. And whenever Frost Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, tap target permanent. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So if you've ever played against Frost Titan, you know it's good. It is an annoying card. It is hard to get rid of because you got to pay more to get rid of it. Most importantly, it keeps stuff tapped down, and it can keep tapping things down over and over again. It's great. Next we have Bane of Baelor, 7 mana for a 7/5 Eldrazi. Our first Eldrazi, that's right, we got Eldrazi. Whenever Bane of Baelor attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. So I'm including Eldrazi because, you know, not only are they humongous and awesome, but they also help with removal. Yeah, they remove things. You know, we don't select exactly what's removed, but, I mean, definitely there's a lot of removal going on with Eldrazi, which is great. Exactly what we need. Next, we have Deceiver of Form, 6 and a diamond, so that diamond mana has to come from a colorless source. And for an 8/8 Eldrazi, it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, then you may have creatures you control other than Deceiver of Form become copies of that creature until the end of the turn, and you may put that card on the bottom of your library. So as long as the top card of your library is some huge creature, then all of your other creatures, you know, the ideal situation here is, you know, obviously you have a little, you know, army of tokens going, maybe 5 or 6 tokens, and they all become a copy of something like Platinum Empyrion, right? And so that is huge right there. Definitely game ending if we got a few tokens out, absolutely. Next we have Platinum Empyrion, 8 mana for an 8/8 golem that says your life total can't change. Definitely something we need with this deck that's probably going to start drawing hate pretty quickly, and we don't have lots of way of gaining life, so might as well just, you know, have a way to just keep our life total the same for a while, at least as long as Platinum Empyrion remains on the battlefield. Next, we got Mogs Crusher, 8 mana for an 8/8 Eldrazi with Annihilator 2. So whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents. That's right, permanents, not non-land permanents, but any permanents they got. So if all they got's lands, then they're sacking 2 lands. And Mogs Crusher attacks each combat if able. Annihilator is a pretty awesome ability. Next, we have Breaker of Armies, 8 mana for a 10/8 Eldrazi. All creatures able to block Breaker of Armies do so. So, nice little board wipe on a stick here. You know, as long as your opponents don't have too many creatures, then Breaker of Armies will probably survive and just kill all of their creatures. Pretty great. Next, we got Void Winnower, 9 mana for an 11/9 Eldrazi. It says, your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs, and 0 counts as even. Your opponents can't block with creatures with even converted mana costs. So just helping us get in that extra damage, helping us keep the opponents locked down for a little bit while we finish them off. Next we have Inkwell Leviathan, 7 and 2 blue for a 7/11 Leviathan artifact creature with trample and Island Walk and Shroud. Yeah, so basically, you know, when I made this deck, I was researching every single humongous creature possible and just, you know, narrowing them down, you know, a process of deduction into what are just the most amazing non-legendary humongous creatures, and Inkwell Leviathan is definitely one of those, absolutely. Doesn't have any really special abilities other than it will kill you, which is good enough. Next, we have Spawnsire of Ulamog, 10 mana for a 7/11 Eldrazi with Annihilator 1. And you can pay 4 mana to put 2 colorless 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have sacrificed this creature to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. And I love this effect. 20 mana, cast any number of Eldrazi cards you own from outside the game without paying their mana costs. So I really doubt we're ever going to use that last effect. I've never seen anyone use that last effect. God, that would be so cool, though, if someone built a deck around that ability. I'm going to exile all my Eldrazi somehow. I'll exile my entire deck, and then I'll pay 20 mana to put all of them onto the battlefield without even giving them haste or anything. You'd think for 20 mana you just give them all haste as well, but I guess the idea is you do this on the end step of your opponent. Anyway, next we got Pathrazor of Ulamog, 11 mana for a 9/9 Annihilator 3. Pathrazor of Ulamog can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. Yeah, all of these just really amazing, really threatening creatures. Definitely going to draw you a lot of hate. So much I should probably put Glacial Chasm in this deck. Alright, next we have Darksteel Colossus. 11 mana for an 11/11 Golem with Trample. Darksteel Colossus is indestructible. If Darksteel Colossus would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, you reveal Darksteel Colossus and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. Yes, fabulous card. Absolutely devastating. Definitely not as good as Blightsteel Colossus, but, I mean, you know, this isn't competitive Magic deck tech. Blightsteel Colossus is ridiculously expensive right now. Something like $60, $70, even more dollars to buy that card. Wizards, come on, give us another print of Blightsteel Colossus, please, because, yeah, anyway, whatever. Darksteel is good enough. We don't need Blightsteel. But still, if you have it, sure, go ahead and get yourself a Blightsteel Colossus. Great card. Next, we have It That Betrays, 12 mana for an 11/11 Eldrazi with Annihilator 2. This creature, well, I just told you what Annihilator means, I won't do that again. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. Yeah, so when your Annihilator trigger goes out, as long as they're not sacrificing tokens, you get to put those permanents on the battlefield under your control. That is huge. It That Betrays definitely, you know, is a must-have in any Eldrazi deck, which, yeah, we do have a little bit of Eldrazi theme here, just in that our huge creatures are mostly Eldrazi's. Alright, so now on to our non-Titans. We have 4 non-Titan creatures in the deck, and what do you know, they're all legendary as well, just to make sure that we're not going to whiff. Right, so Kefnet the Mindful, 2 and a blue for a 5/5 legendary god with flying and indestructible, and Kefnet the Mindful can't attack or block unless you have 7 or more cards in the hand, and you can pay 3 and a blue to discard... excuse me, you can pay 3 and a blue to draw a card, and then you may return a land you control to its owner's hand. So Kefnet is such an awesome, underrated card for the mana cost. For just 3 mana, you have a 5/5 flying indestructible. You know, potentially, you need to have 7 cards in your hand to make him make a difference. But he also draws you the cards all by himself, just by his own ability. And, you know, returning a land you control to your hand at the right time is, you know, really not hard to do, to get all 7 cards in your hand. And by the way, this deck has plenty of draw. It has plenty of ways to draw you tons of cards, and so I would actually be surprised if Kefnet couldn't attack or block with this deck. So Kefnet the Mindful, really awesome. Next we have our next god, Thassa, God of the Sea, also 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 5/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. So each blue mana symbol in the mana costs of permanents you control count toward your devotion to blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, you scry 1, and you can pay 1 and a blue to give target creature you control unblockable. So Thassa is just a must-have in any blue deck, absolutely. Not drawing you cards necessarily, necessarily, but fixing the top of your deck every single turn is huge. But more importantly, giving creatures unblockable is huge, especially when we're playing a Titan deck like this one. So Kefnet, great for drawing the cards. Thassa, great for fixing the cards. And our other two non-Titans are also great for drawing the cards. Nezahal, Primal Tide, 5 and 2 blue for a 7/7 legendary Elder Dinosaur. Nezahal cannot be countered. You have no maximum hand size. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you draw a card, and finally, you can discard 3 cards to exile Nezahal and return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So, Nezahal is another fabulous choice if you want a mono-blue commander. Just draws you so many cards, and unlike, you know, Ristic Study or Mystic Remora, you know, pretty much when your opponent casts the non-creature spell, you know, you're drawing the card no matter what. You don't have to ask them, are you going to pay for Nezahal or something like that? No, Nezahal just draws you the card. It's great. With Nezahal, you have a huge hand in no time. Nezahal also gives you the no max hand size, and Nezahal sticks around. Discarding 3 cards to exile Nezahal is really not hard to do. With its own ability of drawing you so many cards. Moving along. Alright, Sai, Master Thopterist, is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary human artificer that says whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless artifact Thopter creature token with flying, and you can pay 1 and a blue to sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. So actually this is mostly in the deck to create the creature tokens. But also, you know, it will let us draw a card as well, which is pretty sweet. But mostly it's here, again, just to get us those creature tokens, which we can sacrifice to make to polymorph into Titans. So now that we've mentioned that, let's jump into the token makers, starting with Retrofitter Foundry. Just 1 mana for an artifact that you can pay 1 and tap it. Well, I guess... Okay, we'll start in order. You can pay 3 to untap Retrofitter Foundry. You can pay 2 to tap it, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. You can pay 1 and tap it to sacrifice a servo, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and you can tap it to sacrifice a Thopter to create a 4/4 colorless construct artifact creature token. Blah! So many stupid words. But most importantly is the second effect. Just create a 1/1 servo. We don't even care about anything else because we're just going to sacrifice the servo to Jalira to make something else. Even great. But, you know, I guess if someone happens to have, you know, imprisoned in the moon Jalira or something like that, we can always, you know, use this to make an army of 4/4 construct creature tokens. Next we have Captain's Claws, 2 mana for an equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, put a 1/1 core ally creature token onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and it has equipped for 1. So just a nice cheap way to create creature tokens. Definitely not guaranteed, but as long as we have 1 creature out, such as Jalira, and we can attack with her just once, we get that core ally creature token, and we can sack it to make a Titan. So not bad for just 2 mana. Then we have Thopter Spy Network, 2 and 2 blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So this is pretty much guaranteed to go off in the deck. Like I said, we got 26 artifacts in the deck, so not going to be hard for Thopter Spy Network to be going off. Next we have Trading Post, 4 mana for an artifact, and you can pay 1. What this card should have said is pay 1 and tap it, choose one of these options. You either discard a card and gain 4 life, or pay 1 life and create a 0/1 white goat creature token. That's what we're going to be doing most of the time. Or sacrifice a creature, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, or sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. So, like I said, mostly we're going to be doing the second option here, but man, having those other options is huge, is absolutely huge. We are definitely going to be using these other options all the time. Trading Post, definitely a great card, kind of for any mono blue deck, absolutely, because, you know, we need ways to get our artifacts back from the graveyard to gain life, you know, certainly. Next, we have Sword of Body and Mind, 3 mana for an equipment with Equip 2, and it says equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from green and blue, and whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield, and that player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So a little bit of milling there, but what's more important is that, we are giving Jalira protection from green and blue, hopefully, and putting little creature tokens onto the battlefield, which we can polymorph. Next we have Druidic Satchel, 3 mana for an artifact, which has pay 2 mana and tap it. Reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you put a 1/1 green sapperling creature token onto the battlefield. If it's a land card, you put that card onto the battlefield under your control, and if it's a non-creature, non-land card, you gain 2 life. Again, another great choice for any mono blue deck to help with ramp and to help put out creature tokens and to gain some life. Next we have Acorn Catapult. This is definitely one of my favorite discoveries as I was looking for cards for this deck. Definitely a super just cool card. 4 mana for an artifact. It says pay 1 and tap it. Acorn Catapult deals 1 damage to target creature or player, that creature's controller, or that player puts a 1/1 green squirrel creature token onto the battlefield. So we could just, hit Jalira with this or hit ourselves with this to put squirrels onto the battlefield. Pretty excellent. Next we have Notorious Throng. 3 and a blue for a tribal rogue sorcery. It has Prowl. Unfortunately, we have pretty much no rogues in this entire deck, so whatever. Unless we, get Notorious Throng again after casting it once, maybe we can, get the Prowl cost then. So if, it has Prowl 6, pay 5 and a blue. You may play this for its Prowl cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a rogue, and its ability is you put X 1/1 Black Fairy rogue creature tokens with flying into play, where X is damage dealt to your opponents this turn. If Notorious Throng's Prowl cost was paid, take an extra turn after this one. So yeah, if we can somehow get this back to our hand and cast it over again while we just dealt damage with the rogues, we could potentially do the Prowl cost. Most of the time, this is just a 4 mana creature token spell that, can work pretty good. Finally, we have Snake Basket, the coolest artifact creature token maker. So, X mana, sacrifice Snake Basket, put X Cobra tokens into play, treat these tokens as 1/1 green creatures, play this ability only as a sorcery. So yeah, 4 mana for this artifact is a pretty sweet deal. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a nice little token maker. And you might have noticed, not a lot of these are like, you get 1 billion tokens, or like I said, our theme isn't to put 1 million tokens on the battlefield. We don't care about that. All we care about is getting a few tokens out that we can turn into a few titans, and that's enough to usually win the game. If we happen to get a nice little army of tokens on the way, that's a great deal as well. And also, it works really well with the titan strategy to have this, token strategy as well in the background. We're going wide and we're going tall. That's just always game winning right there. Absolutely. So on to some things that work great with Jalira. Illusionist's Bracers is 2 mana for an equipment. Whenever an ability of the equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you copy that ability, and you may choose new targets for the copy, and it has equip for 3. So basically you get to use Jalira's activated ability twice, as long as she's equipped with the Illusionist Bracers. You do have to sacrifice 2 creatures, but you end up getting 2 titans for the price of 1. Pretty sweet. Next we have Synthetic Destiny. 4 and 2 blue for an instant. Exile all creatures you control. At the beginning of the next end step, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal that many creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way onto the battlefield, and then shuffle the rest of the revealed cards into your library. So this is a massive polymorph, just like the card Mass Polymorph. The difference between this and Mass Polymorph is that this is an instant. I mean, they're basically the exact same card, the exact same mana cost, but this is instant speed, so this is obviously much better than Mass Polymorph. Just being instant speed. Unfortunately, this does also have the effect of, possibly hitting our 4 non-legendary creatures, but, those guys aren't so bad either, so pretty great, especially if we have a decent amount of tokens. I mean, if we just have 7 tokens out, that is just huge. Having 7 Titans enter the battlefield, yeah, it's just ridiculous. Game ending for sure. Alright, next we have Swiftfoot Boots, 2 mana for an equipment. With equip 1, equipped creature has hexproof and haste. And we have Lightning Greaves, 2 mana for an equipment. With equip 0, equipped creature has haste and shroud. So these two are really great with Jalira, because then you get to use the ability right away. Not only do you get to use her ability right away, but you can also re-equip these onto whatever Titan you brought out onto the battlefield and then attack with that Titan right away. And that's huge. Giving your creatures haste is giving them an extra combat step. Next we have our 2 Planeswalkers. Karn, Scion of Urza, is 4 mana for a legendary Planeswalker that enters with 5 loyalty counters. You can +1 to reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. And -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So Karn is really great for creating a nice little artifact creature army. More importantly, he just makes creature tokens that we're going to be sacrificing for Titans. But also, just multi-purpose card here, drawing us cards and getting us the tokens as well. So that's fabulous. Next we have Tezzeret, Artifice Master, 3 and 2 blue for another Planeswalker that enters with 5 loyalty counters. +1, you create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. 0, you draw a card. If you control 3 or more artifacts, you draw 2 cards instead. And for -9, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, search your library for a permanent card and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle your library. Wow, this is just so good, especially with our deck. I mean, if you get that last ability off, you're putting a Titan onto the battlefield for free every single turn. Yeah, that's obviously game winning right there. But again, we have lots of artifacts in the deck, so with that 0 ability, we're almost always going to be drawing 2 cards. And man, Tezzeret's so good. Just that +1 ability giving you a flying creature. Who does that? Who gives you a creature with flying? That's just awesome. Tezzeret is so ridiculous. Alright, moving along. I'm going to drink some water real quick. All this talking. I don't know how everyone else does it. They just edit out themselves drinking water. Alright, so I got Counterspell here. Is the first of our counterspells. 2 blue for an instant, counter target spell. Next we got Swan Song. 1 blue for an instant, counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller creates a 2/2 bird creature token with flying. No, there's no weird synergy where we get the bird, though that would be cool. But this is just a great spell. Great counterspell for any blue deck. Just 1 blue, counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery, which are almost always going to be the spells that matter anyway. There we go. Next we got Mystic Confluence, 3 and 2 blue for an instant. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Return target creature to its owner's hand and draw a card. So most of the time you're going to be countering a single spell and then drawing 2 cards. That's what I most often do, but yeah, I mean, obviously you could do any combination of these in any order, but yeah, the main reason this is in the deck is for the counterspell ability. Next we have Foil, 2 and 2 blue for an instant, counter target spell. You may discard an island card and another card rather than paying the spell's mana cost. So you do have to discard 2 cards, but being able to have, just a counterspell for 0 mana, always good. Foil is a pretty decent card, actually. Just tricking your opponent, When you're playing mono blue, the experienced players are always going to be looking at your open mana. They're always going to be like, all right. Basically, they're going to do this. When you have, like, 3 blue mana open, they're not going to play any spells. You know, they're like, all right, well, I'm just doing nothing, and I pass the turn, right? But with a card like Foil, you know, you just discard a couple cards, and you counter their spell anyway. Ha ha ha. Next, we have Muddle the Mixture, 2 blue, counter target instant or sorcery spell, and it's got Transmute, so you can pay 3 mana, discard this card from your hand to search your library for a card with converted mana cost 2, and put that card into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Do that only as a sorcery. So, Muddle the Mixture is mostly in here to get us our Lightning Greaves or our Swiftfoot Boots, things like that, but, you know, we got plenty of 2-drop, you know, ramp spells in the deck. I guess we could get to, yeah, mostly here as a counter spell, you know, but if we need Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots, this is a nice way to do it. Next we have Commit to Memory. So Commit is 3 and a blue for an instant. Put target spell or non-land permanent on top of its owner's library, second from the top. Nice little removal. But more importantly, we have the spell in the deck for Memory. 4 and 2 blue, the Aftermath. Each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into his or her library, then draw 7 cards. So, Commit, actually, you know, you might have noticed it says put target spell or non-land permanent, so that does work as a counter spell, even against spells such as Nezahal that can't be countered. Well, you're technically not countering them, and you're just putting them back into their owner's library. And Memory, though, is just really great for this deck, especially when you, because not only is it drawing you cards, but it's allowing you to shuffle your hand back into your library, and that's what you want to do when you have all the Titans in your hand. You know, we don't want the Titans in our hand with this deck. We want the Titans in our deck, so we can polymorph into them. We don't want to hard cast our Titans. So that's why we have Memory, and we also have Game Plan, same reason. So Game Plan is 5 and a blue for a sorcery. It has Assist, so another player can pay up to 5 mana of the spell's cost. And it says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, and then draws 7 cards, and then you exile Game Plan. Again, we're not discarding our hand, we are shuffling it back into our library, which is, you know, again, really helpful when we have those huge Titans. Next we have Thought Reflection, 4 and 3 blue for an enchantment. If you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Next we have Ristic Study, of course. 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1 mana. So, with this and Nezahal, you're going to have most of your deck in your hand in no time. It just gets out of control. So with Ristic Study, just remember, you got to stay vigilant. You got to watch out every single time someone plays a spell. You know, you can't even like go to the bathroom when you have Ristic Study on the battlefield. Or if you do, you know, you got to trust your opponents. They're very honest people. All right, next we have Staff of Nin, 6 mana for an artifact. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. And you can tap Staff of Nin to deal 1 damage to any target. So I did actually originally have the Immortal Sun in the deck, but the Immortal Sun shut down our Planeswalkers, even though we only have 2 Planeswalkers. I don't like having any dead cards in my deck. You know, I don't like drawing a Planeswalker and saying, oh, it doesn't work because I have the Immortal Sun, even though the Immortal Sun is just so awesome. But anyway, so Staff of Nin is also just as pretty awesome, and the main reason we had Immortal Sun in the deck was to draw a card at the beginning of our upkeep, so that's sweet. And also, though, we get to deal 1 damage to any target. That's not something mono blue decks get to do a lot of, so that is also pretty helpful. Next we have Mind's Dilation, 5 and 2 blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of his or her library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So basically, you're casting your opponent's spells with Mind's Dilation, and that is really huge. You're also casting them without paying their mana cost, which is even better, right? You just get to cast them for free, and that's what we really need, things like this in the mono-colored deck. So Mind's Dilation is perfect for this mono-blue deck, absolutely. Next we have Flow of Ideas, 5 and a blue for a sorcery. Draw a card for each island you control. Yeah, so hopefully that's going to be a lot of cards. I'm guessing about 6, if we have 6 islands out. Next we have Wayfarers Bobble, 1 mana for an artifact. Pay 2 and tap it, and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, and put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Yeah, that's right, I said the battlefield tapped. So Wayfarers Bobble is a card I haven't used much in the past just because I never took the time to buy them, but you know, they're not very expensive. They're pretty cheap right now, so you should go buy a bunch of these and pretty much put them in every commander deck that isn't mono green, or that isn't green. Wayfarers Bobble is just fabulous. It gets you a land onto the battlefield for just 3 mana. It goes in any color deck. Pretty sweet. Next we have High Tide. One blue for an instant. Until the end of the turn, all islands produce an additional blue when tapped for mana. So it doubles all the blue mana your islands tap until the end of the turn. That is just huge and definitely can win you the game if you got the right spells in your hand. So obviously we were into card draw, now we're getting into ramp here. So we got Soul Ring. Next we have Sapphire Medallion, 2 mana for an artifact that says blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So that's every single blue spell you cast. So this nets you a ton of ramp over time, absolutely, especially if you can just like turn 1 Soul Ring into Sapphire Medallion. That's just that's huge right there, definitely. Next we have Unstable Obelisk, 3 mana for an artifact that taps to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 7 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to destroy target permanent. Any permanent, we can destroy it for good. Again, mono blue has that problem where it's really great at bouncing things, at turning things into other things, at enchanting things, but it's not so good at straight out destroying things, so Unstable Obelisk is a welcome addition to this deck. Next we have Sword of the Animist, 2 mana for a legendary equipment. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. That is huge. That nets you a ton of mana really quickly, and it has equip too. So I put Sword of the Animist again in any deck that isn't running green. I even do put it in some decks that run green. It can get you a land on the battlefield every turn for just 2 mana. Of course, it does have that equip cost, equip 2. Next we have a Rozka Relic, 3 mana for an artifact with Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game, either as you cast this spell or, once it's on the battlefield and you eventually get 10 permanents, then you'll have the City's Blessing. So, Rozka Relic taps to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can tap it and sacrifice it. You gain 3 life and draw a card. You can only do this if you have the City's Blessing. So, this is, just mostly here for the ramp, but also, this is a great card in general. I've actually seen a lot of Commander players using it because it just like Commander Sphere, you can sacrifice it to draw a card and you gain 3 life also. That's awesome. That's great. So get yourself a copy of a Rozka Relic pretty much for any Commander deck as well. Next we have Kefnit's Monument, 3 mana for a legendary artifact. It says blue creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So, it doesn't tap the creature, but as long as the creature was already tapped, it won't untap during the next untap step. That's pretty cool. So, continuing, we have Commander Sphere, 3 mana for an artifact, taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card, even after you've tapped it for mana. Pretty sweet. Next we have Thran Dynamo, 4 mana for an artifact, taps to add 3 mana to your mana pool. Excellent. Next we have Imprison in the Moon, which is the start of our removal. So Imprison in the Moon is 2 and a blue for an aura. It has enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. An enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap to add a colorless mana to your mana pool and loses all other card types and abilities. This is fabulous at getting rid of commanders because they remain on the battlefield just transformed into a land. Pretty much works on any creature though as well, or planeswalker or land. Next we have Cyclonic Rift, 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. However, if you pay the overload cost for 7 mana, you can return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. This is such a great card because it's instant speed. I often use it at my opponent's discard step, or in response to their discard step, so they have to discard almost all those permanents they return to their hand. Pretty brutal. Next we have our 2 polymorph destroy spells. So Pongify is 1 blue for an instant. Destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated. Its controller gets a 3/3 green ape creature token. And next is Rapid Hybridizate. 1 blue for an instant. Destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated. Its controller gets a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token. So this is pretty much a straight removal, which is pretty great for blue, but they do get a creature token that replaces the creature, and, you know, it's not tiny. It's still a 3/3 creature, which is bigger than your average man. So, you know, but still, we're in Commander, and we're playing Titans, so we don't really care if they got a 3/3, as long as we got a 10/10. Alright, next we have All is Dust, 7 mana for a tribal sorcery, Eldrazi. Each player sacrifices all colored permanents they control. Yeah, so that might mean you have to sacrifice a couple things too, but, you know, like I said, we have so many artifacts in the deck and colorless creatures that we're probably not going to care. This is probably the perfect removal spell for this deck, absolutely. Next we have River's Rebuke, 4 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Return all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hand. Yep, so it's only target player, but that's pretty devastating, absolutely. Alright, so that's the end of the deck. That brings us to the lands. Starting with Minamo, School at Water's Edge. This legendary land taps for a blue, but you can also pay a blue and tap it to untap target legendary creature, permanent. So that's really great with Jalira, actually. You know, being able to untap Jalira is perfect, because then we can tap her again and activate her ability again, so that's fabulous. Next we have 3 cycling lands. So cycling means you can discard the card to draw a card if you pay the cycling cost, and that's really important on lands because, especially in Commander, you know, we can get mana flooded really easily. So for mana flooded, it's great to have a few lands that we can cycle away to draw different cards. So Lonely Sandbar enters tapped, taps to add a blue, and you can cycle it away for 1 blue. Remote Isle enters tapped, taps to add a blue, or you can cycle it away for 2 mana. Desert of the Mindful. I said desert because whenever I play the card, I actually say desert just because I'm a big dork. I always say Desert of the Mindful. Enters tapped. Taps to add a blue mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 at a blue and cycle it. Next we have Halimar Depths, which is a land that enters tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. And it taps to add a blue mana to your mana pool. Really helpful with the Titan deck, you know, rearranging the top of our deck to try to, you know, choose which Titan we're getting out. Next we have Coral Atoll, which is a land that enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice it unless you return an untapped island you control to its owner's hand, and it taps to add both a colorless and a blue mana to your mana pool. Alright, so hear me out. This might sound bad, but these cards are actually really good when you think about it. I mean, if you think about a mono green, when it ramps, you know, it'll usually pay something like 2 mana to get a land card onto the battlefield, right? With, say, something like Farseek, right? 1 and a green, you search your library for a basic land and you put it on the battlefield. So Coral Atoll, it's the same thing. I mean, you're using 1 land, the 1 land you're returning to your hand, and you're using a second land because Coral Atoll enters tap, so you're basically using 2 lands to net yourself 1 extra mana over time. It's the exact same thing as Farseek, except guess what? You're not casting Farseek, so it's actually even better when you think about it, because it's just the land all by itself doing it. You're not using an extra spell to do it. So I think these lands are great. There's 1 of them for each color. I suggest you get them for Commander because they're great in our format, our long game format. Not so good in 1 versus 1, but we're in a long game format where we don't mind returning lands to our hand. Just make sure this isn't, you know, the only land in your opening hand, along with like 1 other land or something like that. You know, it's definitely a land for later in the game, or just not for turn 1, basically. You know. Next we have Temple of the False God, which taps to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. Which again, we're in a long game format, so if you don't control 5 or more lands eventually, I mean, you're probably going to lose anyway. But I've never been in a situation where this didn't work. It's always worked for me. I put it in pretty much every deck. So get one now, they're pretty cheap. Next we have Blighted Cataract, which is a land that taps to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 5 and a blue to tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. Just a little extra card draw on a land. Next we have Reliquary Tower, which says you have no maximum hand size. Pretty helpful, especially when we have, you know, the Ristic Study and Nezahal and so much card draw. We need cards like Reliquary Tower, definitely. And finally, we have 31 islands. And that is it. That is Jalira, Master Polymorphist. So, if you enjoyed this deck, hey, go ahead and hit that like or that subscribe button. It really helps out a lot. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.